Hello, I'm Ryan, and welcome to my channel, Analyze This Mr. Bond, where I discuss the adventures of James Bond 007 and dig for what lies beneath the surface. Today we're digging into James Bond Day. James Bond Day, if you do not know, is the day that commemorates the premiere of the first Bond film, Dr. No. This year was the 63rd anniversary of Dr. No. The Bond series has been with us that long. James Bond Day was first celebrated in 2012, the same year that Skyfall came out, when it was the 50th anniversary of Dr. No, and Eon Productions launched this day as a way to celebrate the James Bond film franchise. This year, the 63rd anniversary is obviously not a particularly critical anniversary year for Dr. No, but Bond fans were really eager to see what would come of this year, since this is the first James Bond Day to arrive since Amazon MGM claimed creative control over the James Bond film franchise. What would Amazon MGM do for James Bond Day? And from what I've seen on social media, the response from fans is mostly a response of disappointment. Going into James Bond Day, I, like a lot of Bond fans, didn't have the highest expectations. Eon, when they were managing the series, had mostly let James Bond Day languish. It was a series of diminishing returns, especially after the Craig era resolved and there wasn't another Bond film looming on the horizon. In fact, I even ran a poll asking my followers on Instagram whether they expected any big news to come out of James Bond Day, and the response was an overwhelming no. Nobody really expected James Bond Day to deliver serious news about Bond 26. Bond 26 is a ways away. By most unconfirmed reports, it's targeting November 2028. That's a long ways away. James Bond is not going to be cast yet. The script isn't even done. There wasn't really something looming on the horizon to announce. Nevertheless, I can't help but feel that this was a missed opportunity on the part of Amazon MGM to really establish themselves as the new caretaker of this franchise. I can understand why Amazon MGM would feel a little bit indifferent to James Bond Day. It was something they inherited from Eon Productions, and Eon Productions wasn't even particularly celebrating it. So why would they make such a big deal of it? Complicating matters further is that there have just been a number of projects that are legacy projects from the Eon Productions tenure. 007 Road to a Million was an Eon Productions collaboration with Amazon. We've seen those 2 seasons emerge, come and go. And the other big Eon Productions collaboration project, 007 First Light, the upcoming video game, which Eon Productions helped support the creative development of, is going to be released early next year in March. So there is this period where Eon Productions' legacy projects are coming to fruition. I can understand why Amazon MGM would look at this and say, it's not time for us to make our move. What I really hoped for was something a little bit different. I've never had any fear that Amazon wouldn't capitalize on the Bond property. I knew that as soon as they got their hands on Bond, that we were going to see momentum towards Bond 26, and I'm increasingly excited about Bond 26. That's something I've talked about in my most recent video. But the other piece of the puzzle is that Amazon MGM is now the de facto caretakers of the James Bond brand. James Bond, as a cultural icon, is tied to his cinematic legacy. He is tied to the Eon Productions Bond films that made him an iconic character for the world. These films, from Dr. No to No Time to Die, are a critical piece of cinema and cultural history. And Amazon MGM is now its primary caretaker. So while I didn't expect much in the way of news about the upcoming Bond film, maybe at most we could have gotten a nice little promo video with some of the creative team talking about how excited they were to be participating in this project in its early stages. That was the most we probably could have hoped for. I really did hope that Amazon MGM would take a retrospective look at the series they've inherited and celebrate it with some real fanfare and showmanship. And I want to give Amazon MGM some credit. The one big thing that happened this year is that GoldenEye was re-released in theaters to celebrate its 30th anniversary. That more or less coincided with James Bond Day. But weirdly enough, the celebrations felt disconnected. They weren't united in showmanship. It wasn't that the release of GoldenEye coincided with any particular GoldenEye celebration on the day. There was no retroactive interviews with the creative team of GoldenEye on the day when it hit. There was no particular fanfare around it, even just in the promotional content that was coming on social media. We got some of the standard issue stuff from the 007 Instagram account and 007 website, but we didn't get anything to particularly celebrate GoldenEye or the other films that were having an anniversary this year. And the only other big piece that was done was putting all the Bond movies on Prime Video for free. Launch that again felt somewhat disconnected from Bond Day because they were put up for free before Bond Day hit. And furthermore, there was a bit of a media blunder with those augmented images that were used for the key art that awkwardly erased the guns from all the poses of the James Bond actors so that their hands were now in particularly weird and unappealing positions. It was a weird move, and it obviously didn't go over well, and they backpedaled and returned to the previous art. So that kind of all just felt very disconnected. There just wasn't a lot of attention paid to how these events could have been pulled together to build to momentum on James Bond Day. And that, I think, is the biggest thing that's missing from all of this. It's not that there weren't gestures, it's just that there wasn't coordinated showmanship. And showmanship is really what is needed here. And honestly, for Amazon MGM, this is probably uncharted territory. They've touched iconic properties before, but they've never really been the caretaker for a legacy property like James Bond before. James Bond is a unique property. The only other franchise that seems like it holds a similar kind of place in terms of continuity is something like Star Wars, but James Bond has been going on since the 1960s. That's before the Star Wars films, and the books go back even further than that. So I'm not sure that Amazon MGM is quite prepared for the level of expectation that can come around that. And obviously our fan community is a little bit more low-key than, say, Star Wars fans. So we're more accommodating. We made the most of the day itself. And in some ways, Amazon MGM could have just leaned into that aspect a little bit more, just helped give shape to what the community was doing on that day. There were some gestures towards that. The 007 account eventually posted this lightweight but interesting idea of what sort of meal pairings you could do for each Bond movie. It's the kind of thing that could have easily been expanded into a, Road to James Bond Day kind of experience where every Bond film got its own little mini menu that the website was advertising, saying, oh, if you're going to watch this movie on James Bond Day, here's a possible menu. You could have even upped the game a little bit further. You could have brought in mixologists to suggest different cocktails, maybe even have recorded reels with the mixologists showing you how to make the drink alongside clips from the movie. There was a lot of time and effort that could have just been put into making what was already there a bit more coherent as an experience. But the gestures themselves could have also been bigger. The GoldenEye re-release in the United States was a little bit meager in terms of the chains that participated. It wasn't a widespread release. It certainly didn't have a theater showing it close to me, and I'm not in the boonies. I live by a major city, so it was strange that GoldenEye wasn't there. I certainly would have liked to go gather some friends and go see it. So that event wasn't there. The Bond movies being on Prime Video is something that's happened before. I mean, we're used to the Bond films being available on streaming. That was a nice gesture, but it didn't really have enough fanfare with it. The other elephant in the room are merchandising releases. That was a really big part of the Eon Productions tenure from Skyfall on, where we saw a lot of brand collaborations, a lot of merchandise tie-ins. Here, that's kind of dwindled. I think been a bit of a lull in the way that Eon Productions is transferring over to Amazon MGM and these licensing agreements, some of which will continue, some of which won't, being in this state of limbo. But I think it would have been really nice to just see Amazon MGM use some of its own resources to produce some unique merch for James Bond Day. I proposed on Instagram they could have made a whole suite of items, t-shirts, mugs, pens, whatever, just with the phrase James Bond will return. We know a Bond movie is a long ways off, but it's a classic mantra associated with all the Bond films prior to it that could become a nice motto for the Bond series in this period of anticipation for something that's pretty far off. You could just kind of keep plugging into that mantra, and eventually when you are ready to announce the new Bond movie, it's very easy to kind of tie that into whatever marketing campaign you really want to kick off at that point in time. But that's just an idea. I was speaking with one friend who suggested that they could have set up a contest so that the community was contributing content for James Bond Day, and there was some sort of notional prize given on the day. Anything to make the day feel intentional. It's a bit like a date night, if you'll excuse the analogy, but I think it holds. The expectation for date night is not that every date night is a high-end dining experience, that you're going to some Michelin star restaurant and you're going to have a 5-course meal with wine pairings all the way. That sort of fanfare is not what's expected to connect people. It's more about setting the stage for connection. So a good date can be to someplace local. It can be a good burger joint, or it can be an outdoor concert in the park, or anything like that. But what's important about it is this sense of connection. And so even when I'm saying showmanship, it's really more about the communication of intent and care. And coming away from James Bond Day, it just felt very disorganized and indifferent. That's a bummer, because I think even in this interim period, Amazon MGM had a vested interest in coming out here and celebrating James Bond. We haven't had a Bond movie in a number of years. We're not going to have a Bond movie for many years more. The opportunity was here to just make a big deal of it, to continue to surface that property into the consciousness, maybe do some mild ripples across social media, and get the water a little bit warmer for whenever you do want to launch a proper press conference for Bond 26 when the time is right. In the end, it's not the end of the world. I don't really need a James Bond Day. I didn't need a James Bond Day to enjoy the Bond films before Eon Productions established it. But if James Bond Day is going to continue, I hope the next one is better than this one. I hope it's better than the past few. I hope that there's some real intentionality around it. I hope we continue to see things like the GoldenEye re-release. I hope that gets expanded. I hope we do start to see the return of more exciting product drops and merchandising tie-ins. I hope we get to see more intentional shaping of community experiences, more direct engagement with the Bond community, this exciting, vibrant collection of people, which is doing really well on its own and could do really well participating in a broader, more structured activity or conversation across social media. I think all of those things would have been really valuable. It would have been a really fun way to just bring the community together and make sure that we were all on the same page in a way that united us to the caretakers of the series that we've grown to love. So let me know your thoughts, how you felt about James Bond Day. Let me know what you would hope for from James Bond Day in the future. And as always, I'll catch you in the next one.